The transaction command has a couple options built into it, two of those being max span and max pause. These two options allow us to control the overall time of the transaction, max span allowing us to keep track of the maximum total time between the earliest and latest events in the transaction, controlling that time range. Whereas max pause allows us to set the maximum total time between events within the transaction. Both default to -1, meaning there is no maximum time limit. And if we take a look at an example here, let's take a look at the actions taken by customers on our website during the last 4 hours. In the field sidebar, we see the action field containing values such as add to cart, change quantity, and purchase. We want to understand all the actions users have taken in one session on our website, so we pipe to the transaction command and supply the client IP field. We will use the max span argument to filter our results to transactions spanning a maximum of 3 minutes. We can also use the max pause argument to limit our results to filter out any individual events with more than a minute between them. Our results are returned grouping together all events from the same IP address with a maximum total time of 3 minutes and a maximum of 1 minute between events. Notice in the field sidebar that we now have two additional fields, duration and event count. By default, the duration field is represented in seconds. To display this in a more readable format, we will pipe to the eval command and use the toString function with the duration option. We will sort our results in descending order by duration and can now display client IP, actions, and duration on a table. Now we see what actions were performed, associated with each client IP, and the overall duration of the transaction. Now we can also control what our transactions start with and end with. So let's say that we are interested in where a customer added something to their cart, and when they purchased something, we don't care what happened before or after that, just what happened in between those actions. I'm going to change up my search a little bit here. This time, instead of forming a transaction across the client IP field, we are going to go back into a transaction across the JSession ID field. And I'm going to filter on transactions that start with an action equal to add to cart and end with an action equal to purchase. Now, if we run this search, that is going to filter to 330 events. And if we take a look, we can see this first event in this transaction has an action equal to add to cart. This last event has an action equal to purchase. So we're looking at everything that happened in between when the customer added something to the cart and when they purchased that item. Now, one other example that we can go with is that the security operations team is maybe trying to track an issue in the web servers in the online store. In this case, over the last 24 hours, we want to find the 503 errors generated by user sessions in the online store and display 4 related events before it. So if we jump back over into transaction JSession ID, we're interested in looking at where we have transactions that end with a status of 503. And we'd like to see the 4 related events before it. In addition to starts with and ends with, we have a max events option built into the transaction command that allows us to filter on transactions with a maximum event number of 5. All right, so here we're now looking at transactions that end with an HTTP status code of 503. And if we wanted to highlight exactly where that 503 status code appears, we have a highlight command that will highlight whatever we tell it to. In this case, we're having it highlight the number 503 within each event. And we have a maximum number of 4 events displayed before it. So we can go ahead and take a look at events that occur before. We can also filter on transactions that start with instead of end with a value. So in this case here, we may want to find a status code of 200 instead of 503. And the 3 related events after it. So we'll specify a max event number of 4. This will filter on about 9,000 events. And we're going to look at transaction events that begin with a status code of 200. And then displaying the 3 related events after that. Now, the transaction events are just like any other event in Splunk. We can follow the transaction command by multiple additional commands. In this example here, we're using the search command to then display transactions that included a 404 error during the last hour. We can filter on just those transaction events that contain an HTTP status code of 404, and then highlight where exactly the 404 is located within these transaction events and where the JSession ID values are. In addition to that, we can pipe to transforming commands after the transaction command, where we may be interested in creating a chart to show the number of purchase transactions based on their overall duration. So if we go ahead and take a look here at filtering on successful purchases in the online store and forming a transaction across the client IP field, I may want to set the maximum time span here for these transactions to be 10 minutes. Now notice the transaction command keeps me in the events tab. I can then pipe to a transforming command such as the chart command and count by the duration field. This will display the number of transactions based on their duration. And the chart command has a span option built into it. So if I wanted to view this in, let's say, a column chart, this is what my column chart would currently look like. I can update this and add a span value of log 2. This will bucket the duration into bins using logarithm with a base of 2. That's essentially going to be the log of a given number, which will represent the exponent to which the base, in this case 2, must be raised in order to produce some number. In this case, the result of using span log 2 is setting the duration of each bin. Each bin represents an exponentially longer duration. Now, the transaction command can contain the eval function embedded within the starts with and ends with options. We may be interested in determining the length of time spent to complete a purchase by customers in the online store over the last 24 hours. In this case here, we would like to filter and evaluate where an action was added to the cart and a status equal to 200. In that case, we're going to wrap this within an eval function. Once that returns to true, we will filter on only those particular transaction events that start with and end with this particular filter.